The wind carried a chill that didn't belong in spring. I stood on my porch, boots planted on creaking wood, watching Red, my oldest hound, stand still as stone at the edge of the pasture. His nose twitched in sharp little jerks, low growls. Rumbling in his chest, the other dogs stayed back, uneasy. That wasn't normal. Red had seen more action in Afghanistan than most men. If he was unsettled, something was wrong. A faint hum drifted through the dusk, just enough to notice if you were listening for silence. Somewhere beyond the trees that marked the boundary with the HOA community, a faint flicker of motion lights blinked out and vanished like a ghost. We'd only been here 3 weeks. I'd inherited the ranch from my grandfather. The old man passed, with more secrets than friends, but he'd left me the land, the cabin, and a stretch of freedom I hadn't known I needed until I left the city behind. After retiring from military service and a few bitter years wrangling security contracts, I'd brought the one family that never betrayed me. My dogs, Red, the leader, a reddish-brown bloodhound who could smell lies through a hurricane. Moose, the big one, clumsy outside work but relentless on a trail. And then there was Trixie and Luna, the kids, both still young and energetic. All of them trained, disciplined, and more reliable than most people. At first, it was peaceful. Long walks through tall grass, dogs running through creeks and chasing scents that meant no harm. I'd rebuilt the fence, patched up the barn, and started clearing the south field. I thought we'd found peace. That illusion shattered the day. She showed up. It was a Tuesday late morning when I first saw her. She came storming up the dirt road like she owned it, a pink tracksuit and oversized sunglasses bobbing toward my gate. Behind her trailed a scrawny white dog that looked like it had never seen grass. She didn't knock, just marched straight up, pointed a perfectly manicured finger, and said, "Those dogs cannot be off-leash." I blinked. "Sorry, who are you?" "I'm Karen Witherspoon, president of the Hickory Hills HOA. This road," she said, jabbing her finger toward the gravel lane I'd just widened, "is shared access. And those dogs are a danger to the community." I leaned against the fence post, arms crossed. "Ma'am, this ranch has been here for 70 years. This land doesn't belong to your HOA. Her lips curled. "All land here is subject to neighborhood safety standards. Section 12C of our regulations covers animal activity within visible range of the community. That includes barking, roaming, and off-leash activity." I looked over at Red, who sat calmly beside the barn, tail wagging slowly. "They're trained. They don't bite, chase, or leave the property." Karen pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of Red. "Doesn't matter. I'll be filing a complaint. You'll be hearing from us." I should have let it go right there. Should have turned and walked away. But something about her tone, it wasn't just arrogance. It was ownership. It's like I was a trespasser on land my family had bled to keep. "That's not how this works," I said evenly. "We're not under your HOA. I've got the deed and survey. Documents to prove it. You can check with the county." She snorted. "We'll see." She turned on her heel and walked back to her golf cart, the little white dog yipping after her like a backup singer. That was the first encounter. It didn't get better after that. A day later, I found a laminated HOA notice zip-tied to my gate. Notice of violation, unrestrained, dangerous animals. 2 of my dogs' names were printed on it. I knew it was her doing. No one else from that community had even said hello. I called the sheriff's office. It confirmed what I already knew. My property was entirely outside the HOA jurisdiction. As long as my dogs didn't leave my land or cause harm, I was in the clear. The deputy even laughed when I read him the off-leash barking nuisance clause. But Karen wasn't laughing. She started showing up daily, sometimes with binoculars, sometimes with a clipboard. I'd catch glimpses of her behind trees near The fence, scribbling notes. One afternoon, I walked toward her and she backed off like I was a wild animal. "You come any closer," she warned, "and I'll file for harassment." "I'm on my land," I said. "You're the one lurking." In bushes. That night, I walked Red along the fence line. He stopped near the woods and let out a strange whimper, not scared, but alert. His nose pressed into the dirt, circling. I followed his gaze. Something had been moved recently. Dirt shifted. A small area cleared, maybe 2 feet wide. Too neat. For an animal, Red darted ahead, disappeared into the brush, then returned 5 minutes later. Something clutched in his mouth. It was a pink sleeve, torn, smelled like strong perfume and dirt. I recognized the color instantly. Karen's tracksuit. That same evening, I heard tires crunching on gravel. Blue and red lights lit up the pasture. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out of their cruiser. "Sir," one said, "we had a call about aggressive dogs loose on the road." "From who?" He didn't say it outright, but the deputies glanced toward the subdivision said enough. "Dogs are in the yard," I replied. "They haven't left the fence all day." Red sat beside me calmly, tongue lolling as if he knew. The whole scene was ridiculous. After inspecting my property and reviewing the GPS collars I used to monitor them, the deputies apologized and left. "Don't worry," one muttered. "We get calls from her often." But worry was exactly what I started doing. 2 nights later, Red refused to come inside. He stood staring at the fence line again, tail stiff, teeth bared. I walked out with a flashlight and found him pawing at the base of the old oak tree. The dirt there was soft, too soft. I knelt beside him and caught a faint whiff chemical, sharp, like bleach, mixed with decay. Something was buried there. A low mechanical whir buzzed from beyond the fence. Barely audible, but it stopped as soon as I turned the flashlight toward it. And then, just beyond the brambles, I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't seen before. A shed, tucked behind the tree line, surrounded by overgrowth. Metal panels. No windows. It wasn't on any HOA map or survey. It wasn't on Karen's property plan, I was sure of it. Red looked up at me with eyes that had seen war zones and wreckage and didn't flinch. But now he trembled slightly and let out a single low bark. That's when I realized whatever was going on here wasn't about barking dogs or imaginary rules. Karen was hiding something, and Red. He was getting closer to the truth than anyone had before. The next morning, Red sat by the door, staring at me with the kind of intensity that only a dog with a job could muster. He wasn't hungry, he wasn't restless, he had something to do. And I already knew where he'd take me. The moment I opened the door, he trotted ahead, tail low, head down. Moose and Trixie followed behind, curious but not as driven. Red led us straight to the oak tree again. He sniffed the base, circled twice, then sat, waiting, watching. I brought a small spade and carefully started to dig. It didn't take long before the dirt changed. Softer, looser, almost like it had been disturbed just days ago. A few more inches and something caught the blade of a rusted tin box. Maybe the size of a loaf of bread, the lid warped at the edges. I knelt, heart pounding as I pried it open. Inside were dog collars, 4 of them, torn, dirty, faded. One had scorch marks, another had dried blood along the strap. They were all different sizes, different breeds. None were tags I recognized from around here. Red sniffed them one by one, then sat back and let out a low, trembling whine. I stared down at the collars and something twisted in my gut. This wasn't just about someone being careless. It didn't look lost. They looked discarded. Erased, I took photos, packed the box. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew who I needed to talk to. Karen's house sat behind a perfectly manicured lawn, the kind with turf so green it made your eyes hurt. Her white columns and flagpole screamed suburban. Control. She was outside, snipping at a rosebush like she was conducting surgery. I approached slowly, holding the box under my arm. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw me. "You're trespassing," she barked before I even reached the edge. "Of her yard? I'm not on your land," I replied, voice calm. "But I do have questions. About the fence line and the shed behind your trees." Her hand froze mid-snip. "There is no shed," she said flatly. "There is. I saw it last night, and I found something nearby. Buried. Want to guess what?" She turned and walked up her porch steps without another word. Just like that, no denial. No concern, just retreat. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I stood there a moment longer, absorbing the silence. No movement behind the curtains, just the weight of something unspoken pressing against my ribs. She wasn't scared. She was calculating. That was worse. That afternoon, I stopped by a neighbor's house, Mr. Phelps, retired, quiet, but kind. He'd waved at me on my first day in town. I figured he might know more. "You're asking about Karen's shed," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't think anyone else noticed. So it's not on her property plan." He shook his head slowly. "I've been here 25 years. That thing just showed up one spring about 5 years ago. No notice. No construction permit, just there. And nobody asked." He snorted. "Asking questions in Hickory Hills gets you a fine or a cold shoulder. HOA doesn't like nosy folks, but some of us saw things. Dogs going missing, strange smells. Lights at night." My stomach turned. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because Karen makes problems disappear. Not just dogs. Complaints, too." I left with a pit in my chest. Back at the ranch, I started taking steps. First, I installed trail cams along the fence line. One pointed toward the shed, another covered the oak tree. I angled a third across my pasture, catching the shared access road. Red helped me test the placement. Every time I neared the shed's edge, he'd tense, sniff, and bark just once. A warning? 2 days passed quietly. Karen didn't show her face, but she wasn't idle. On the third morning, I found a new sign zip-tied to the ranch gate. Pending zoning review. Potential code violation. Below, it was a letter, typed in bold, citing obscure local codes about fencing height and animal containment. It had a fake county seal at the top. I laughed. She was getting desperate. That afternoon, a white sedan rolled up to my gate. A woman. Stepped out, clipboard in hand, polite smile on her face. "Hello, I'm with Hickory Hills Zoning Committee. We've received a report of unauthorized structures on your property. Who sent it?" She didn't answer. I offered her lemonade and a look at my official land deed, including boundary lines and historic grandfather permits. Her smile faltered. She left 10 minutes later, mumbling about needing to review documents further. Later that night, Red barked twice at the back corner. I followed, keeping to the shadows. Sure enough, I spotted motion beyond the fence. A figure crouched near the shed. The door creaked open. A faint light spilled across the brush. Karen, she stepped inside with a bag in her arms. Vanished into the dark, then emerged empty-handed and slipped away like a thief. I waited until she was gone. Then approached. The shed was locked thick. Padlock, chain around the handles. But the door hadn't closed all the way. Red sniffed the seam, ears flat. I pressed my ear against the metal panel and heard a faint hum. Refrigeration. A fan. Something was running inside. I didn't try to open it, not yet. But I snapped a dozen photos. The structure clearly crossed the property line. Its back wall spilled inches onto my grandfather's land. That gave me grounds. The next morning, I contacted the county land office and filed for a boundary violation inquiry. One attached the photos and noted that an unpermitted structure was possibly in use without disclosure. No exaggerations, just the facts. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, a deputy came knocking. He had a file in hand and a raised eyebrow. "Mr. Langston," he said, "mind if I take a look at the area you mentioned?" I led him down the side path, Red trailing at our heels. We stopped just short of the fence. The shed was in full view. Now, exposed like a secret finally dragged into daylight. She told us there was nothing here. The deputy muttered. I figured. He stepped closer, peered through the fence. "You say she crossed the property line, easily by 2 feet. I've got the survey flag just there." He nodded slowly. "We'll be back with county officials for inspection. In the meantime, keep your distance." I agreed. But Red didn't. That night, he returned to the same spot and barked. Not frantic, just one deep, guttural sound. A warning, again. I crouched beside him, hand on his collar, and whispered, "Whatever's behind that door, we'll find it." Behind us, the wind stirred the grass, and the faint whir of machinery buzzed in the distance. Something was alive in that shed. And Karen wasn't just hiding it, she was feeding it. 2 days after the deputy's visit, the wind shifted. Not in the weather, something else. Something in the air. Karen hadn't made an appearance since that night I spotted her sneaking into the shed, but the silence felt more dangerous then. Her daily rants ever had. I knew she was planning something. That much was obvious. The real question was whether she knew I was too. I spent the morning setting a new trail camera just inside the tree line, facing the shed at a better angle. Red sat beside me like a statue, his nose twitching every few seconds, eyes locked on the metal structure like it might breathe. I didn't speak to him, not really, but I could feel the understanding in his posture. He was waiting for my signal. So was I. The dogs had stopped playing near the fence. They no longer chased rabbits or rolled in the grass when the wind blew from the east. They stuck close, alert. Even Moose, who usually lumbered around like a goof, now stood tall when the shed came into view. They felt it. Something about that place was wrong. The next move came not from Karen herself, but from the mailbox. A thick, printed packet. No return address, just to occupant. Inside, a supposed notice of land violation, accusing me of operating a commercial kennel without a license and threatening civil penalties of up to $50,000. It cited pages of fake statutes, all clearly lifted from unrelated counties and doctored in a sloppy rush. The kicker was the final line: cease operation or be subject to seizure. That's when I smiled. I'd seen this tactic before: throw enough legal-looking paper at someone and hope they fold. But what Karen didn't know was that I had worked in legal consulting before leaving it all behind. And my cousin was a zoning officer for the county next door. After a quick call and a few scanned pages, we had more than enough to report her for impersonating a government entity. That wasn't just petty. That was criminal. But I didn't want to go to the authorities yet. Not completely. I wanted to see what she was hiding for myself first. That night, I left the porch light off and waited in the shadows. Around 11:43 p.m., the shed lights flickered to life. Just a faint glow under the door. No motion near the house. Then I saw Karen stepping lightly across her yard, wrapped in a dark hoodie, dragging something behind her. A cooler, small, dented. She reached the shed, unlocked the padlock, and disappeared inside. Red growled low in his throat. I put a hand on his neck. Not yet. Boy. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. When she finally emerged, she didn't have the cooler anymore. She paused before locking the shed, looking over her shoulder once, and then scurried back into her house. The light died. and the silence returned. I waited another hour before moving in. The lock was thick, but old. The kind you could persuade if you knew where to apply pressure. I didn't bring the dogs across the fence. I didn't want them near what I might find. My flashlight flickered across the interior as I slipped inside. The smell hit first metallic, sweet and stale, like old blood mixed with rotting meat. The air was thick, humid, unnatural. I scanned the room. Cages, stained floors, chains bolted into the concrete. Scraps of fur clung to the bars. The walls were lined with soundproofing foam, poorly installed and moldy in the corners. On a nearby shelf, I saw rows of vials and syringes labels scratched off or peeled away. And in the center of the room, one large kennel covered by a tarp. I approached slowly, peeled the cover back. Inside was a stuffed burlap sack, stained dark at the bottom. The stench was unbearable. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Every inch, every detail. No commentary, just footage. Clean, clear, indisputable. As I backed toward the door, the flashlight beam caught a photo nailed to the wall. A framed picture. Karen, smiling wide, arm around a teenage girl holding a small brown terrier. The girl had been on a missing pet flyer taped to the post office board weeks ago. I remembered the name, Marley. That terrier had never been found. The rage came slow, hot, and controlled. I knew if I acted on it now, I'd ruin everything. So I slipped back out, relocked the door, and disappeared into the dark. The next morning, I walked into the sheriff's office with a USB drive and a printed copy of my land deed, including the section where the shed crossed into my boundary line. The deputy, same one who came out earlier, leaned forward in his chair. "This is bad," he said, after watching the footage. "I know. She's been using zoning threats to keep people away. Neighbors have seen lights, heard noises. Animal control's been looking into a spike in missing pets the last few years," he added. "No proof, until now." By the time I left the station, 3 departments were in motion: sheriff, county zoning, and animal welfare. But I had one more step to take. That afternoon, I filed an injunction at the county office to seize any structure encroaching on my land. My lawyer and old Army buddy sent a notice to Karen's address, certified and time-stamped by nightfall. The trail. Cams captured Karen pacing in her backyard. Phone pressed to her ear, waving her arms like a drowning woman. I watched the footage live from my porch. Red curled at my feet. Her mouth was moving fast, angry, desperate. The next day, 2 unmarked trucks and a squad car rolled up to her driveway. Karen met them in a silk robe, smiling too wide. I knew that look, someone pretending everything was fine while their whole world was on fire. I stayed back, watched from my side of the fence as the deputy approached her, a folder in hand. "We need to inspect the shed," he said calmly. Karen froze. For a heartbeat, she didn't blink. "There's no shed," she said. The officer gestured. "Ma'am, we can see it from here." She turned slowly. Her shoulders dropped. "That belongs to my nephew. He uses it for storage. Your property. Plan says otherwise, and it overlaps with adjacent land." Her smile crumbled. They walked her toward the shed. I couldn't hear what she said next, but her arms flailed. She pointed at my ranch, at the fence, at the dogs. Red, hearing the commotion, stood tall at my side. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The deputy opened the shed. Light flooded inside. One of the animal control officers stepped back with a curse. Another clamped a hand over his mouth. Karen's voice rose like a siren. "You can't be here. You can't. This is harassment." But it was too late. She had kept trophies. Evidence. Pain. The chaos was just beginning, and Karen with her fake ordinances, her smug warnings, Her leash threats was finally about to be leashed herself. Karen stood frozen, her mouth open, but her words jammed behind disbelief. The deputies didn't need her permission now. The shed's lock had been removed, its secrets spilled into the daylight. One by one, officers entered and emerged with grim expressions. The scent wafting out was enough to make bystanders recoil, a noxious blend of chemical rot and something unmistakably organic. I stayed behind the fence, Red sitting calmly beside me. He didn't bark, he didn't need to. His silence said more than any growl ever could. This was his justice too. From my vantage point, I saw one of the officers holding a black garbage bag, carefully sealed and tagged. Another retrieved the rusted tin box of collars I'd left behind, now properly bagged. As evidence, the last officer exited with the cooler. His face was pale, his jaw locked tight. Karen still hadn't moved. She shifted only when the deputy read from a folded document in his hand. Her voice finally broke free, brittle and desperate. "This is a misunderstanding. That structure isn't even mine. My nephew, he stores hunting gear there." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, the property records you filed last year include the shed as an approved addition. You signed it. And you claimed ownership during your HOA registration updates." "That's not true. I was told I have rights." "You do," he replied coldly. "But not anymore. You're under investigation for multiple violations, including animal cruelty, zoning fraud, impersonation of county officials, and falsifying legal documents." Karen backed up a step. "No, this is harassment. He set me up." She pointed a shaking hand across the fence. "That man, he's stalking me. He's dangerous. Look at his dogs." I met her eyes. Without a word. She saw something there she hadn't expected. Resolve, patience, control. Everything she'd lacked. The officer followed her finger, then looked back at me. "You mean Mr. Langston? The one whose trail cameras caught you transporting bags into a locked structure on land you don't own? The one who called this in with supporting documents, dated footage, and a clean service record?" Karen stammered, flailing as though drowning in her own unraveling lies. Her voice climbed higher, shriller. Every accusation aimed at me ricocheting off the calm professionalism of the law. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "You're going to need one," the deputy muttered. She was cuffed within minutes. They didn't drag her, but they didn't move gently either. As she passed my fence line, her eyes locked on mine. There was no apology in them. No remorse. Just humiliation, hot and raw. The neighborhood began to stir not long after. Phones came out. People watched from their driveways. The rumors bloomed like fire across dry grass. By evening, someone had uploaded a video of Karen being escorted to the cruiser, screaming about conspiracies. Within hours, it was viral on the local neighborhood forums. A headline appeared: "HOA president accused of hidden shed cruelty." But the real nail in the coffin came from the county office. The day after Karen's arrest, I received confirmation that my land survey had triggered a seizure request for anything built illegally across my boundary. The shed was officially and legally mine. I wasted no time. With the blessing of the authorities who had finished collecting evidence, I called a demolition crew. They didn't ask questions. I paid extra for speed. Within 3 hours, the structure that had haunted my fence line was reduced to a twisted pile of rusted steel and stained wood. I kept one thing, the foundation stone that sat at the shed's front corner. I hauled it to the edge of the property and placed it beneath the old oak, right where Red had first alerted me weeks ago. I buried the box of collars beneath it, this time for good, marking it with a metal tag. 4. The forgotten Karen's fate spiraled quickly. With mounting charges, a judge denied her early bail. Her lawyers tried to claim mental instability. But leaked emails and HOA correspondence painted her as fully aware, fully calculated. Turns out she'd been falsifying HOA citations for years, some for money, others for power. Several pets that had vanished from the area were being connected to her shed. She was finished within a week. A new HOA board was elected. Mr. Phelps, the quiet man who once warned me, was voted president unanimously. He stopped by one afternoon with a basket of homemade bread and a handwritten note of thanks. "Some of us always suspected," he said. "We just didn't have the teeth to fight her. You brought the hounds." I chuckled. Red did the real work. The town changed after that. Slowly, but noticeably, people who once ignored the ranch started waving as they passed. I got letters from parents thanking me for what I'd done, telling me they'd feared their kids' missing pets were more than just accidents. Some even dropped off treats for the dogs. Red, for his part, took it all in stride. He still watched the fence line every evening, but with less tension now. He still led the pack on patrols, still slept by the front door, but I caught him wagging his tail more often. He knew it was over. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cold drink in hand, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The air smelled clean, touched with pine and earth, peaceful again. Real peace, not the illusion we'd walked into weeks before. Trixie and Luna chased each other near the creek. Moose was belly up in the grass, twitching in some happy dream. And Red sat beside me, head on my boot, eyes half closed in the last rays of daylight. "I owe you, old man," I said softly. "You sniffed out the rot. All I did was listen." He didn't answer, of course. Just gave one deep sigh and settled in. A few days later, someone posted a meme in the local Facebook group. It was a screenshot of Karen mid-rant, her face frozen in fury, next to a photo of Red sitting proudly in front of the demolished shed. The caption read, "She thought she was top doggin' till she met one." It got over 30,000 shares, and that was justice. To not just the handcuffs or court dates, but the fact that her legacy now lived in ridicule. She wasn't feared anymore. She was mocked. A warning to others who thought power came from paperwork and threats. And as for me, I had my land, my dogs, and the kind of quiet you can only earn. The kind you defend with teeth if you have to. Because out here, wind still moves through the trees. But it doesn't carry fear anymore. It carries the echo of one long, steady bark, the kind that says, "We found you, and we're not afraid."